Cool. So really quick, I'm Niko. Sorry about the technical problems, but excited to share with you some integration best practices that we've been working on here at Redox, and we've been learning as we've worked with hundreds of applications who've integrated to 200 plus health systems across the country now. So I'm going to take it from the perspective of the application. So if you imagine your application, our customers at Redox are software developers primarily. They are the people who are making the applications who are really driving the future of healthcare. The folks that are bringing technologies that are going to bring efficiency gains, and the developer experience that we know is needed. It isn't really out there right now. So that's what we strive to create. And one of the main challenges in getting a modern cloud-based application into the hands of healthcare providers where it's going to make a difference is integration. So what we've seen across the landscape is every health system and every electronic health record that they're using has a slightly different and customized way to set up integration. So we made these lines different colors because they truly are different, unique ways to integrate with each group you might be working with. So that can be a real challenge, and it's a challenge that comes in a few ways. What we've seen working with different applications is that over time, your ability to integrate, you get better at it. So essentially the first couple that you do take a lot of work, but it settles down as you get better at it and grow your expertise around it, which is the good news. But each subsequent implementation, each time you implement and roll out at a new customer, there's a fixed amount of work that goes into that. The customization required at each health system, figuring out how to connect up, figuring out any EHR customizations. One of the challenges in kind of from a macro sense in this space is that because of the large lift on deployment, essentially we live further and further from a world where you can have kind of turnkey integration or turnkey application deployment, which is what we have in the consumer space, right? When I download an application onto my phone, like a new calendar app, for instance, I can use it right away. I can evaluate if I like it, and if I don't, I can delete it. Without having to go through a big buying selection process and all of that. The point here is that because of these long integration timelines and amount of work that it takes to implement, we see technology adoption within health systems really slow down because of that. If they could implement in a turnkey fashion and deploy an application quickly, we should see your applications getting to market faster, getting used more quickly, you guys getting feedback faster, and really driving technology adoption in healthcare. And that's our number one goal. Beyond just the implementation and deployment of these software, there's also an increasing amount of work on the maintenance side, because once you implement, you have to maintain those integrations over time. You have to go from the one site to the second to the third, and each one of those comes with maintenance that monitoring the error queues, watching them 24/7 depending on your product if it's used, especially in acute settings. We need to have 24/7 monitoring around it, watching errors, making sure there's no patient safety considerations, and then just the normal cycle of EHR upgrades requires an amount of work on maintenance. So what we've seen, kind of taking a look at integrating with health systems, as you look from a scaled perspective, is the amount of work effort that goes into integrations kind of increases over time. As we've worked with applications who have done this with a number of sites without using Redox, what we've seen is that their integration teams can start to bloat, where at the beginning, you might have one or two people working on it, but over time you end up staffing that team with more and more people until the points where some groups that we've worked with have grown their integration teams to between a third to half of their development resources. And the main point of all of this is that as a product company, your team should be focused on building features of that product, making that product work really well, making it differentiate from others, and not on the integration. So don't become an integration company. It's something that everyone has to do, but it's not something that should differentiate you from anyone else. And it's not something that you should be spending your developers' times on. It's something that really should be commoditized across the entire industry. And that's what Redox tries to do. So when we look across the different innovation that's happening in healthcare right now, so this kind of top line of applications, coming out with really interesting new things in the space that should be driving efficiency gains and quality improvement and patient experience improvement and provider experience improvement. Their ability to integrate turns into this web of redundancy, of inefficiency, and this is what I would consider a market failure across our industry. Something that we care a lot about, and so we really see ourselves as a platform in the middle that we maintain one connection into a health system, and then we can reuse that connection for any technology that needs to use it there. So this is a networked approach to integration, and something that is truly different about how integration works today. So we're going to get into talking about the best practices in rethinking integration and how to actually do this at scale without needing to spend so many resources from your own development team in building and managing these types of integrations. So I mentioned it earlier, but the first big thing is this networked approach to integration. Let's hop into that for a second here. But the main point of it is that any application that's connected to Redox and any health system that's connected to Redox can now talk to each other. We have an interoperable network, and what that means is that we currently have about 200 healthcare organizations that are using some sort of application on the network. So if you want to work with the Brigham, for instance, we have interfaces set up there such that we can simply turn them on, and that brings implementation times down from the 6 months or a year that it would typically take to start an integration from scratch to, on average, about a couple weeks. And what we've been seeing more and more of as this network grows and as these health systems are using more applications from the network is that we've seen implementation times go from essentially reduced by a magnitude of time to where we have implementations that are kicking off in the morning and going live in the afternoon. So the number of same day or same week go lives that we're seeing is increasing more and more. And that's something that we watch really closely at Redox to see if we're actually driving value in the network. The speed to value of integrating your product at a health system gives the health system their ability to realize the ROI of your products quicker. Therefore, both helping patients and helping the bottom line, but also helping them realize the value in your product and hopefully helping sales from that perspective as well. So it's one of our huge goals is to decrease that implementation time so that they can be utilized faster, which is why we have this networked approach, so we can reuse the infrastructure that's already set up. We pulled out a bunch of logos here of kind of top named health systems that we're connected to that are running applications. But obviously across the 200, it goes across the entire spectrum from the kind of bigger, more prominent health systems and academics and IDNs, all the way down to we support integrations to small practices using Athena, NextGen, and eClinicalWorks, and some of these smaller EHRs that might be used in a specialty practice or in small, 1 or 2 doc practices. On the flip side, we have a lot of applications that are already using Redox. So the thing I love about this slide is that these applications really represent the full spectrum of digital health, everything from patient-facing applications that work on engagement or patient-reported outcomes or digital therapeutics, all the way to back-end workflow improvement tools that patients will never see and users might not ever see, but improve the efficiency of care delivery in some way. Redox, we really see ourselves as kind of a neutral player in this space. So we support applications that compete with each other. We support applications across the scale from very early stage startups who are implementing at their first site, all the way up to very large companies who are implementing at scale across dozens or hundreds of sites across the country. That's how we realized our scale with Redox, is these companies bring us into their conversations with health systems, and we get them implemented quickly. And that in turn grows our network for everyone else. So working with us allows you to grow on the backs of those who came before you and help to establish the network, as well as help to grow the network for the entire ecosystem. So there is really an ecosystem play here where we support this developer community of vendors creating products, and everyone benefits from that. And the only way to do that is through this centralized multi-tenant approach. So I'm going to get into how that works here. Really, there's kind of these three components of it. So there's the managed service, which is us actually doing the work. There is manual work that needs to go into integration still, but we figured by centralizing it, we can both spread those costs across the entire network, as well as reuse that, because you're only going to implement at a health system once, but other applications could use that same integration or that same infrastructure that was set up. And that's the whole point of Redox, is that once we implement, we are mapping those fields, mapping those interfaces into our canonical API, and then have that reused. So we're going to do those implementations. We're going to do those data mappings. We're going to help with strategy around integration. If you're embarking on a new EHR or a new type of customer or a new product announcement, that you need to come up with a new integration strategy. So all of that is kind of included in our full service offering. This middle bucket here of the engine itself, I'll get into a little bit about what makes our engine unique, but we have state-of-the-art APIs that were designed specifically for the developer experience. So unlike a lot of the standards out there, and unlike a lot of the EHR APIs that were really designed to kind of from a bottom-up approach of like, how do we expose all the data that's possible? We came in it from a top-down approach of what are the workflows that we know are needed from a digital health perspective, and how do we make sure we enable those and that they're easy to use. So the developer experience is a top priority for us. And then of course, we have 24/7 monitoring and support, literally on-call engineers and incident managers who have a pager. It's not a literal pager, but it's, we use a paging system so that if there's any downtimes, if there's any errors at any of the sites, those are addressed as soon as possible, because any connection we have into a health system, it could be used by dozens of different applications. So we centralize that monitoring and support process, so your team doesn't have to be the ones getting up at 4 a.m. Unless there truly is a problem on your side of the application. So diving into it a bit, people always ask what types of things are supported. So just a quick snapshot of the different types of interfaces, but it's really across the entire continuum of care. Everything from onboarding your patient for the first time, or onboarding a user like a provider, getting demographics around them, getting the full clinical history. We also support single sign-on. It's kind of a newer data model that we're supporting, but actually launching an application from within the EHR, within the context of a patient. All sorts of different things like that. And then of course, the full spectrum of clinical data. We also get into the land of financial transactions and claims. So we see those for different types of applications that might need that as relevant data as well. The way we do that, this is kind of a snapshot of a typical type of integration. So I'll go from the left-hand side here. So this could be a health system customer of yours, but they're typically running an EHR. A lot of them are already running an interface engine on premise. They also have other systems like a radiology system, lab systems, other things like that. We connect up to them primarily through a VPN. We use VPNs because that's what health systems are most comfortable with. So it's their preferred way to connect, but we have a lot of other options there too. So we've connected up with health systems over WebSockets. We've done data dumps, we've done API connections, but it's really on the left-hand side, it's really whatever the health system data center is most comfortable with. Redox conforms to that. And so, 4 times out of 5, it's going to be a VPN, but in some cases, we're using more modern connections into health systems as well. We blast a heartbeat through that VPN. So if traffic is or if traffic is light, we can still make sure that it's up and running. So we do a lot of maintenance around helping folks maintain those connections to these different groups. Once the data gets in our engine, so we're hosted in AWS, we're in the cloud. As I said earlier, we're multi-tenant, so it's the same engine that everyone uses across our entire network. We have a configuration library, which are really connectors to different standards and vendors, where we can take data and pull these connectors. I like to think of them as Legos, pull them off the shelf and stack them up to create the connection to those EHRs and those interfaces that are being pulled from those EHRs. From there, it passes through our engine where we're parsing the data, we're standardizing it, we're filtering, we're routing messages to where they need to go through that API on the right-hand side to the various applications that might need it. Applications and health systems access the engine through our dashboard. So anyone right now can go and set up an account in our dashboard and start playing around with it. In there, you'll find the full documentation of how the API works. You can set up your connection, set up your webhook, get your API key, and then interact with our developer environment. So we have some test patients and test providers in there around each of our data models, so you can actually interact with the API and understand what it would be like to integrate in a production environment. So that's something free and available to anyone publicly to use, as well as our documentation is open and public too. And then, of course, we maintain an API connection to the application ecosystem. So we have a webhook connection for a lot of our push style messages. So we'll be pushing transactions to applications. We also have the ability to set up REST style interactions, and that's where Data Chateau comes in. So we can actually store off some transactional data and make it available over REST APIs. This is kind of a nuanced point that is sometimes overlooked in the EHR integration space, but most of the data that's available from an EHR interface comes over an HL7 feed, which is a transactional message. So if something happens in the EHR and fires a message outward. Sometimes that's great because you want to know in real time when a patient's discharged, for instance. But what makes that difficult is if you want to know the entire schedule for a provider for tomorrow. You can't really know that unless you were listening to that entire scheduling feed over time. So what Data Chateau does is it enables that to become, takes a transactional message and enables it to become REST. So I have a little bit of a diagram here about functionality that we have to actually normalize these types of workflows across different types of capabilities. So on the left-hand side are kind of like your requirements as an application. Do you want an event-driven push notification based on when a patient's discharged or when an order is put in, or do you want to be able to query for that and ask the data, show me all the appointments for tomorrow, or show me all the patients who were discharged yesterday, instead of getting that in real time. So what we do is we can essentially enable either of those things by some different functionality. So if the health system only has an event-based capability set up, so they're sending HL7, we can either send that straight to you over the webhook, this kind of event-to-event style integration where we translate it into a JSON, normalized JSON API-based data model and push it to you over webhook, or we can store that off in Data Chateau and allow you to query it based on predefined queries into Data Chateau. Similarly, if the health system only has query-based APIs available, so this is like a lot of health systems using Athena, for instance, or if they put a lot of effort into creating an API layer that is custom to that organization, what Redox does is, yeah, we can take a query and simply pass it through theirs and normalize that query syntax so you don't have to kind of rebuild integrations, or we can actually pull against that API. So one of the things that we started doing is if you want to be notified every time a new appointment comes into Athena, for instance, Athena only has the ability to query for new appointments. So what we do is we set up polling where we query it at some predetermined interval every 30 seconds, every 30 minutes, whatever the interval makes sense from your perspective. And then if we see new data, we can push it to you as an event. So this is really how we get around the limitations of EHRs and the API setup and turn that into something that can be truly consistent for your developer experience. So you don't have to think about all of these things as you're building out your application, because we already did. What this results in is an experience where you can really code once to a consistent API on a single endpoint and connect to any health system using any EHR, using any standard. So whether they're sending HL7 v2 or whether they're using new FHIR profiles and FHIR resources that are available, it doesn't matter. So there's a quote here from our friend Glenn over at HealthWise, but they started using us after using Mirth for a long time. and managing integrations to many sites. And so switching to Redox for them was a process that alleviated a lot of their issues they were seeing running integrations on their own with Murph, and allowing them to use a more modern REST style API. Big win on that front. Getting back to how this scales, right? So this is kind of the picture that we drew before of your typical status quo integration and how that work effort goes over time. What we've seen with customers that we've worked with at scale with Redox is that we, on average, save about 100 hours of time per integration over the first year that the integration happens at a health system. So there is still upfront work. Your first couple integrations with us take a little more effort than your later kind of at scale integrations. But what we're seeing is almost an asymptotical approach to zero on the amount of work effort from your guys' perspective. Some of our customers that we're implemented with 20, 30 sites with are really just leaning on us to deploy these integrations, and all their team has to do is focus on training, is focus on making sure that end users are using their software appropriately, and Redox is the ones. Everything from a health system engagement and point of view to monitoring errors to doing EHR upgrades and things like that. So both from the implementation side, reducing the amount of effort, as well as on the long-term maintenance, taking that on for groups. We thought Bree had a good quote here. We've been working with them for a long time over at Code Technologies, and she said it would have taken twice as long, cost twice as much to have built this without us. And that's really something that we strive to achieve is the ability to drive those efficiency gains in that deployment process and in the long-term maintenance of these integrations. So really quick on Redox in general. I'm one of the co-founders of the company, president of the company, and so I've been doing this since around 2014. Before that, I worked at Epic and was on various teams there, but met my co-founders and met a lot of our employees there. So our headquarters is out here in Madison, Wisconsin, where we cut our teeth in the healthcare space, but we also let our employees work wherever they want. And so we've opened up offices in Seattle and Portland, Chicago, Austin. We're opening up a Denver office here in summertime. So if you're out in that neck of the woods, excited to set up shop there. I'm sure we'll be throwing a taco party there soon. But we have about 55 employees right now. Across the team, about 150 years of EHR experience. So this is both at Epic as well as other EHRs as we've grown the team and as we've grown our expertise in integrating with all these different health systems. So across the 200 plus health systems that we're maintaining integrations to, we have about 30 plus different EHR vendors that we've connected to. So everything from the ones that you probably heard of, like Epic and Cerner and Athena and McKesson and Meditech and Allscripts and all these guys, to the long tail of EHRs that you may have not heard of before. So that expertise has really kind of widened as our network has grown. We've been recognized in a bunch of ways, so you can read that there. But the main point here is that all we do is integration, and we do it to support software vendors who are creating innovations in the healthcare space. That's the main purpose of our company, and it's something that we really see as the ability for us to do it once the right way, and then amortize that cost of doing it across the entire network. So essentially, we can reduce costs of integration for everybody, increase the deployment speeds, and let people scale across the entire network of health systems in a faster way, because we need more technology in healthcare to drive the efficiency gains that our industry needs. So I'm going to close it up there. If you have questions, if you want to continue the conversation, reach out to us. Our website's here. You can tweet at me, and I'll get back to you as well. But thanks for coming out for the webinar, and I'm excited to continue the conversations as we go forward. Thanks. Bye.